This episode is brought to you by Mubi, a global streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema. Starting today, you can catch the streaming premiere of The Substance. Demi Moore delivers a career-best performance as an A-lister past her prime, transformed by a mysterious drug into a gorgeous 20-something played by Margaret Qualley. It's a deliriously entertaining and spine-tingling masterpiece, and you can start streaming The Substance and more for 30 days free at Mubi.com/CityCast. Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking about our city's new mayor-elect, as well as breaking down the city council races. We also have a handful of headlines that have absolutely nothing to do with the election, which includes resident orcas coming back to their hunting grounds and a global championship for one of our most underrated local sports teams. Joining me are Jake Weigler, a local political strategist and partner at the consulting firm Praxis, and KBOO news director Althea Billings. It's Friday, November 8th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Welcome, everyone, to the Friday News Roundup. Althea, Jake, thank you for hanging out with me this morning. How are you two doing?
Good enough. Good to be here, Claudia.
I made it.
Good.
I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for that.
We all made it. For those of you new to the show, today is the day we break down some of the biggest local stories of the week with some of the best and brightest journalists and political consultants in town. And before we jump into the news, I usually ask an opening question so our listeners can get to know our guests a little better. But since we are a daily podcast, there's a possibility you're still catching up on all the shows this week. So I'm going to quickly fill you in on what you missed. This week was a surprise, mostly all about the election. On Monday, we spoke with KOIN investigative reporter Elise Haas about the big changes coming to our city government's infrastructure now that the charter amendments are finally going into place. Tuesday, we previewed what we were looking at this election, and on Wednesday, we talked through the initial results from election night. We took a much-needed break from politics yesterday and talked about fun stuff we can still do in the rainy season. And all of this brings me to our opening question. If you could write and somehow single-handedly pass any local measure, what would it be? I can go first if you guys need a moment to. Okay, great.
Yeah,
Please.
Yeah, they're nodding. They're nodding. Okay, well, supposedly in Oregon, you cannot park within 20 feet of a crosswalk, marked or unmarked. But because there's no enforcement, there are no red painted curbs, everyone consistently parks like right up to a crosswalk, meaning that you can't see people who are crossing the street. I'd like to extend this to no parking zones to all intersections. So most major cities are this way. You know what I mean? You can't park at an intersection because then when you're trying to cross into a street, you can't see. I'm always screaming into like blind turns. I'm always like, ah! I'm just like, oh, fingers crossed.
Sometimes the turns scream back. There might be people there and they're not happy with what you've done.
Well, what about you guys?
Well, I will just take a thing that I think will make some people happy, which is Oregon, we're kind of known for our pot, but it's really hard to have social consumption here because of clean air laws for workplace rules. And as you all may have heard, the cannabis industry is kind of having a tough time. So I think it would be great if we had the option to set up kind of cannabis clubs or places to consume, for tourists. Because you think about, you come here, you can't smoke in your hotel or whatever. So, you need a space to do that. And I think that would probably be good for tourism and for a pot industry, which is on tough times.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know in Vancouver, BC, they allow that.
Yeah.
Like it's illegal to buy it at places, which is weird, but they do have areas for you to smoke it in.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you think about Amsterdam, with the cafe culture there, which is a global destination. But for us, it's like, no, only in your home are you allowed to do that.
Yeah, we need more thirst spaces. That's actually really good. I wasn't sure where you were going with it. And I was like, I don't know where Jake is going with this. We're going to find out something weird about him. And then I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Althea, what about you?
Okay. So my answer started out jokey, right? I had interviewed this District 4 candidate, got eliminated pretty early in the rounds, who had proposed that we need speakers all around the city playing like bird and river noises to sort of calm people down. which I thought was an interesting idea. And it did immediately get pushback from, well, that would be annoying. But maybe there's a way, ballot measure wise, we can sort of mandate wildlife to intermix in our city more to calm people down.
I just learned about sponge cities and now I'm obsessed.
What's that?
Yeah.
Oh
Not
my
related
God.
to SpongeBob?
I mean,
Okay, wait, no, that's my new answer.
just so you know, Google it. It's a completely different podcast, but it's architecturally a way to incorporate wildlife and water essentially into everyday cities. And it's done a lot in China and it's helping with flooding. Look it up. It's awesome, sponge cities. And it's something that I was thinking about for Portland. I was like, oh, we would be so good at this. I do worry about mosquitoes, but aside from that, seems awesome. Well, thank you guys for your new laws. I love them all.
Officially endorsed by CityCast. Yes.
Well, before I hand it off to you, Althea, I just want to note that we are taping this on Thursday morning. So some of the stuff we're going to cover might change since it will be election related. You're going to be breaking down the mayoral race. Is that true, Althea? Did I lie?
Yes. No. You tell only the truth, Claudia. And this one, actually, we do get to have some certainty about. We know who Portland's next mayor will be. Congratulations, Keith Wilson, Earnest White Guy of the Month. He made it. 62% of the vote. The Oregonian called it. Carmen Rubio conceded, and so did Renee. Through 19 rounds of counting. And so it's interesting to kind of go through and see how that momentum was built and where some of those other candidates that we've been talking about, like Leave Ostis and Mingus Maps, where did their support go to for those other higher ranking candidates who shook out higher in the tabulation? So yeah, looking at folks who were eliminated before this kind of like top three coalesced, Viva Las Vegas, her voters were moving mostly into Rubio and Wilson. Gonzalez didn't pick up a lot when she was eliminated. Maps voters were kind of an even split between Gonzalez, Rubio, and Wilson, which is interesting, especially because, right, like Rubio and Wilson, I think, are kind of characterized as very different candidates than Renee Gonzalez. So it's interesting to see like people who were into maps were kind of evenly split about who they preferred the most. Yeah.
Who really is a Mingus voter? I want to know. I mean, it's like, I don't think you have an ideological frame for Mingus.
When we had him on, his platform, he said, was clarity, which was interesting to hear.
Perhaps ironic with what Jake just said.
Yeah.
Cleared it up. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Continue, Althea.
Well, yeah. I mean, from when the first preliminary results were announced to now, Wilson had very strong first choice support. And as you were going round by round, like that continued to grow in a way that you didn't necessarily see in the same way for Gonzalez, which could indicate success for the Don't Rank Renee campaign. I'm sure they're doing the math on whether they want to claim that. And then when Gonzalez was eliminated, his voters went more to Wilson than Rubio. So that kind of indicates where their alignment is. And, you know, also like the trajectory of this campaign, right? Like it was a Rubio Gonzalez race. Nobody was going to come between them except for parking tickets and Wikipedia, which is fun from like we didn't know this a year ago. If you were going to try to predict who was going to be the mayor and why it wasn't going to be either of them, it was kind of a wild card.
Yeah, I feel like most of us were expecting the volatility to come from the rank choice itself and not knowing ever who was in the lead, but it wasn't that at all. What did really blindside us was who were our front runners just to begin with. Like who was actually going to be considered a serious candidate because, you know, Mingus Maps announced his candidacy first. And then everyone else followed, and it just did not line up like we thought it would.
Absolutely.
The Maps campaign was like dormant in the spring. All the journalists were like, hey, are you still running a campaign? He's like, yeah, sure, of course I am. Why are you even asking that? And it'll be interesting to see how this bears out for future mayoral campaigns, you know, because this is sort of like the beginnings of a blueprint for the new system.
I would echo some of what Althea said, you know, and I looked a lot at the poll, the Oregonian release. We talked about it a few weeks ago because like that's the only kind of public data point we had. In that poll, Renee was the front runner in the initial ballot. And then slowly Keith kind of caught up at the very end. And I think, even from that snapshot to the actual vote, you saw Keith continue to rise so that he was the front runner. And then to the point, I do think the Don't Rank Renee campaign was very successful. And yeah, looking forward, it's going to be fascinating because I think it's important to remind people this new mayor is going to be very different than our old mayor. Like, it's not really a legislative job, although you are a tiebreaker.
Mm-hmm.
But it's much more like this external ambassador for the city. And so I think, as we move into a reelection or a campaign 4 years from now, we're going to have a much different frame of what we're like looking for in mayor. Whereas this time, I think, one, we didn't really know. So we're just kind of like, they seem right. And then also, I just will continue to harp on, these campaigns were very underfunded. And so I think the amount of information being pushed out to voters was much more modest, so that something like a Wikipedia edit or parking tickets really shaped the electorate in a way that we'd expect, much more dramatic conversations typically to frame the mayor's race.
Right. I completely agree with that. The Don't Rank Renee campaign seemed to have actually changed how the results shook out. But I also want to point out that Lee Vastas, I think I'm able to share this now, but she very candidly told us when she was on the show that the only reason she ran was when she found out that Renee Gonzalez was going to run. And she just was like, no, sir. And she just wanted to put herself in front of that, if that makes sense. And she was like, even if I don't win, she's like, I know I'm going to split the vote because of, and she was already so good at like knowing how rank choice would work. And she's like, I know my votes are going to go to Carmen. So she really did have a big impact, and a bigger impact, I think, that most of us assumed she would. I do wish that we did have a night mayor. I believe it was our executive producer who swung this idea around. I don't know if you guys heard about a night mayor. I didn't know what it was until I Googled it. I think it'd work with your measure, Jake. We don't really have much of a nightlife.
Mm-hmm.
And a night mayor essentially is like, it is a little honorary, but they do actually bring in input with how a nightlife could be more sustainable, how, our city could be better for tourists, for ourselves, safety, that kind of thing at night. And I think she would be an awesome night mayor. And I wish we could just throw that in.
She can unite all of our nightlife activities under one banner.
Does she need a city seal cosign, or can she just declare herself the night mayor? Yes, I lost the day mayor, but I declare myself night
She's
mayor.
like, night mayor. I'm just like,
Exactly.
Well, Althea, do you want to quickly tell us about some of the measures that weren't announced election night?
I'd be happy to. Locally, looking at the Park Rose school levy measure, that one is currently looking like a no, but about a difference of 400 votes, which is...
That's messed up.
Sorry, Park Rose teachers. It's looking a little tough based on the results that are coming in so far. A lot of folks are on fixed incomes in that area. And so we were talking about a property tax increase to fund those schools. Would have been the first time that Park Rose had a school levy like that. But this was their second try doing it. I'm sure they'll take another crack. And maybe there'll be another way to structure it to get folks on board for that kind of a thing.
Yeah, probably not property taxes. I've talked a lot about that. I'm not going to continue harping on as to why it is a terrible funding source. But go on, Althea.
Okay. We're looking at a healthy lead for the yes on 115. That's the measure that would allow the state legislature to impeach the statewide elected officials. So the governor, the treasurer, the secretary of state, the bully commissioner. 63% right now, so that's looking good for them. In contrast, 116, which would have established an independent salary commission for state legislators, 53% no right now, and about 107,000 vote difference on that. Not looking fabulous for them. Ranked choice voting, statewide, losing 59 to 40 as of the latest numbers. Not looking great. And then 118, which is Oregon rebate, which we've talked about, that I'll call it. Nobody asked me to, but I will.
Wait, what?
By the power vested in me, 78% of no votes.
Yeah, I think that's not going to pass.
I think that's not going to pass. And it was also kind of interesting to look at the numbers that we have right now, that the most number of votes of the ballot measures, like most people did, if they skipped other ones, they did fill in on 118.
Wow.
Which is interesting. So I think, maybe that means their message got out there. And then 119, which would allow cannabis workers to unionize. is likely to pass. We're looking at a 55% on yes
Yay.
there.
We're getting even closer to Jake's vision.
Yes.
It all comes together.
It's all coming together for Jake. Althea, we discussed ranked choice voting and you brought up Alaska. I remember you were just like, oh yeah, Alaska has it and they didn't know how to work it and they ended up getting like a U.S. House Democrat and they were so upset about it. Well, I looked into it and voters in Alaska might actually end their ranked choice voting this time around because they were so upset. And I just thought, I was like, wow. Okay, go Alaska, I guess. I don't know. They were just like, never again. We don't know how to do it. And we ended up splitting our vote between 2 Republicans and a Democrat came through.
I think, with both ranked choice and the salary commission, I think particularly with how grumpy voters are, you really need to start with the problem you're trying to fix. And I think both were kind of like, well, this would make government better. But you never really kind of focus people on, well, there's a problem that needs to be addressed here. And I think that's an uphill battle because I think when people were kind of grumpy and pissed, they're like, no, this is not needed at this time.
Yeah. And I think that it's possible that folks were reading it as, oh, this would pay state legislators more money, which functionally the campaign wasn't selling it on that point. It is probably true, but they were mostly emphasizing from what I saw that no other profession gets to decide their own salary, which is true. But, talking about those other mechanisms of hey, somebody who is in charge of all of this stuff, who you want to be accountable to you, maybe it's cool if this is their only job and they don't have a bunch of other stuff they do on the side when the legislature isn't in session. Maybe that results in better legislators. That wasn't necessarily the emphasis.
What was that? What?
It was like the more you know look. I'm not built for podcast, guys.
I thought you were shushing Althea. I was like, are you shushing Althea?
No, I thought it was
Hush now.
Ooh, yes. Don't say that part.
We're like, what, better legislators? Let her cook.
It's like, imagine that. Who knew?
Ooh la la.
Jake is communicating in a visual medium. I just wanted to translate for our listeners.
Podcast microaggressions. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Althea, thank you so much for breaking that down. Let's take a quick break here. When we come back, Jake is going to check in on the council races. Experience art, nature, and science like you've never seen before at Exquisite Creatures Revealed, the newest exhibit from Christopher Marley, on view now at the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. Exquisite Creatures Revealed features over 10,000 rare birds, reptiles, insects, and other real specimens from around the world in stunning detail. Among them include the first preserved giant corpse flower, an Amazonian stingray, and a 10-foot-long Japanese spider crab. I've never even 10 feet long. That's too long. Which, by the way, were all collected or reclaimed by the artist through sustainable means. Exquisite Creatures Revealed is open now. Get tickets at omsi.edu. That's omsi.edu. Paint Care is all about keeping it simple for Oregonians. They make recycling leftover paint, stain, and varnish easy with convenient drop-off locations like your local paint or hardware store. Each new paint project is an opportunity to reduce waste, and Paint Care has 3 simple rules for painting smarter. 1, you buy the right amount of paint for the job. 2, you use up leftover paint. And 3, recycle the rest. Visit paintcare.org/3simplerules to get tips on how to buy the right amount of paint, explore ideas for DIY projects for how to use up that leftover paint, and to look up your nearest drop-off site. That's paintcare.org/3simplerules.
CityCast Portland is brought to you by Diamore Law Group. Let's face it, sometimes bad stuff happens. A serious injury, a catastrophic accident, or even a wrongful death. It can turn your world upside down. When it does, you deserve unwavering support from a dedicated team. Yep, you need a lawyer. Diamore Law Group has over 30 years of experience protecting the rights of Oregonians. Their team of skilled attorneys, led by distinguished trial attorney Tom Diamore, will work tirelessly to make sure your voice is heard and your rights are protected. Here's what one of his clients said. Tom fights for his clients from the first day they meet him through the last day of trial. If you or a loved one needs help holding those responsible for your injuries accountable, contact Diamore Law Group at 888-222-6333 or visit diamorelaw.com to schedule a free consultation. They are committed to fighting for the justice and compensation you deserve right here in Portland.
Jake, you had the more confusing assignment of the Friday Roundup, which was to monitor all the city council races. How is that looking so far?
So things are getting interesting in the council races, and I think we're close to knowing who the final slate is. You know, we might have a couple surprises, but looking at the data that came out last night, I'd be surprised. I mean, there might be like a 2 and a 3 that switch, but I don't think anybody who's outside is going to catch up at this point. The interesting thing to me is knowing that there were kind of 3 different groups that were, or coalitions that were working to shape the council. You had the business community, kind of the AFL-CIO chapter of labor, and then kind of a progressive equity-oriented table, Portland for All. And seeing kind of how they place their bets, so to speak, of, you know, them trying to set up a favorable council, because after all, the goal is to get 7 votes, which then lets you elect a council president who will dictate the agenda. So I think they all know getting to that 7 votes is really critical. And the irony is no one really got there. So, you know, you look at the list, United for Portland, which is kind of the business community's table, 6 of the candidates that they were really pushing out won. The labor table did get 7, but I will say a lot of those are the same as the business table. There was a fair amount of overlap.
Interesting.
And then Portland for All also got 6, and a little bit of overlap there too. So I think that there's going to end up being a handful of swing votes, or people that maybe aren't in any particular camps. But we can say confidently there's really 5 hardcore progressives, left-wingers on this council. So they're going to provide a pretty strong voice on the left. You also have these kind of more centrist candidates. I will say the Renee Gonzalez kind of aligned candidates did not do particularly well. So I don't think we're going to have kind of a right flank. But then you have a couple free agents like Jamie Dunphy, who looks like he's going to win on the east side. He was only endorsed by the labor table, not the other 2. There was a lot of overlap for everybody else. And he's also kind of been a little bit of a maverick. So I think, he could end up being a swing vote. Alana Pirtle-Giddy, who was endorsed by all 3 tables, so kudos to her. And Steve Novick also got the labor and the business community endorsement. So there's some kind of fence sitters that we'll see, where they end up leaning once they're actually on council. But to me, that's the exciting part is, okay, now we have this new cast of characters. How are they going to fit together and work together and actually get stuff done? Because, in theory, that's the point of the whole new council, right?
Right. Shane Dixon Kavanaugh tweeted off a similar analysis, but his was more like he wrote 3 DSA members, 5 backed by Portland Police Union, 6 men, 6 women, 5 POC, 4 LGBTQ, 6 backed by Portland Metro Chamber, 6 to 7 backed by a pair of progressive labor coalitions. And of course, he also mentioned a lot of overlap. But would it make sense for us to go through each district and just talk about where we're at with each district?
Yeah. So District 1, Candace Avalos, who is, one of the progressive darlings, she runs a nonprofit called Verde, is out in front. I think she'll hold on to that. And then Loretta Smith, she's back. I think you do see some name ID carrying over from people that just, similar to Dan Ryan, people knew who she was. And so that was a big lift. And then Jamie, who I already talked about, who had good progressive and labor support, but also will be maybe a little bit of a maverick. And I don't think that's going to change, although they are a little more closely clustered than some of the other districts.
Because I came up through the Sarah Palin VP candidacy, the word maverick is not a good word for me.
Can you break down what you mean? What does maverick mean?
Well, she was a self-proclaimed maverick. So yeah, that whole campaign was just silly. That's all.
I'll be really interested to see, do they really lock up into tight blocks, like a party essentially, where they're all voting in blocks? Or is it more of kind of a exchange, and that on each issue, you're going to see different clusters of people? And of course, we're going to have a committee structure too, and who gets on these committees and how do those committees push stuff up to the main body? It's a lot of question marks.
Yeah.
Yeah. District 2, Northeast, Alana Purtle-Giddey, as I mentioned, who comes out of labor in the governor's office and got all 3 organizations' endorsements. She looks really good. Dan Ryan, current counselor. So the only member of the current council who looks like they're going to carry over.
Talk about a maverick.
Yeah. And then the other kind of, I think, newer name, I have to admit that I had not followed him closely, Samir Kanal, who ran definitely on the left flank as one of those kind of hard left aligned candidates. And I think you're seeing that in every district. There was at least one for the kind of the Chloe Daly, Joanne Hardesty coalition, the hard left of Portland that has had success in electing people to council. I think they got at least one in every district, and he was definitely the one in District 2. So then District 3, which is Southeast Portland, that's my home turf. Steve Novick, the number 1 vote getter of every candidate, qualified on the first ballot. I think that was pretty unique, and had some nice crossover endorsements, and obviously had good name ID from his previous time on council. So he really stood out in the pack.
Chloe Daly was the one who replaced him, right?
That's right, in 2016.
When he dared everyone to vote him out, and everyone did. Yeah,
Steve had a exciting first term, but I think he's coming back rested and tanned and ready to lead. Okay. And then this is the one where the progressives did better. So you had Teacher Tiffany, who was a big DSA supporter, and Angelita, who also came from the left, and the equity tables were very focused on her. She was already a TikTok celebrity even before she ran. So she had that leg up. So that's kind of where the vote tilted most left. And then District 4, which is the west side, and then a little bit of kind of the Westmoreland area, Selwood area. Olivia Clark was the clear frontrunner there, strongly supported by the business community, but also had the labor support. Eric Zimmerman, he's currently works for Multnomah County Commissioner and worked at the city and the mayor's office, had good business and labor crossover support. And then you had your left-wing activist who was the last candidate who made it on, was a big DSA candidate. So,
you mean Mitch Green?
Yeah. Again, you had this kind of split. And I think, the business community is really intentionally trying to get to 7. I think they know they could get 2 out of that West Side district, and then they recognized that there was going to be at least one progressive that got out of the pack.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think this means now? Like, does it feel to you, Jake, pretty evenly distributed, the leanings towards left, right, center? And again, this is a Portland, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, there were no Trumpies on the ballot. Yeah. I know some people think the Renee camp fits that category, but they didn't do well. So we got a lot of centrists and we got a lot of progressives. And I think it'll be interesting to see as they take up an agenda. Everyone talked about the same 4 issues on the campaign trail, homelessness, public safety, housing, et cetera, et cetera. But then you have to actually govern, and getting into the particulars, and also a nasty budget cycle. Let's not forget the first thing they're going to have to do is figure out how to cut a bunch of stuff. So I think that will be interesting. And I don't think that they're, like I said, kind of locked down in blocks. I think that there will be some vote trading and some different coalitions that form as they dive into this work. So hopefully they're all going to come with their best dressed on and ready to go and excited to kind of figure all this out.
Yeah. I wonder who the president's going to be.
Right?
Right?
I'll just say that I think, this was a great experiment, and we'll learn a lot, and we'll be doing it all again in 2 years for half these folks. I think that will look very different. I think we'll have learned a lot about how to run these kind of campaigns. And more importantly, it'll become much more a referendum on the incumbents, assuming they all want to re-up again after the first 2 years. It'll be more of like, these are the established candidates in these districts, and can someone challenge them versus kind of the wide open field we had this time.
Right. What about you, Althea?
I appreciate the breakdown, Jake. I'm very interested to see who the council president will be. And, I hope they bring their best to their first day of school. I mean, the first day of new government.
Yeah.
Who are you going to sit with at lunch? There's a lot of politicking to be had.
That's what I think. I'm hedging Olivia Clark. I don't know why. I just feel like she's going to... Nobody agrees with me. Fine. You know what? We're taking a break here. Someone needs a pep talk on who's hosting. Just joking. I'm joking. No, I mean, if you have any of your guesses, go throw them out. I threw one out.
I'll say Novick might get it just because he's like the senior statesman.
Okay.
But I also can see being like, no, we want someone new and dynamic.
I would say Candace Avalos.
Ooh.
She's run a lot of committees. And she got 4 newspaper endorsements.
Yeah, she would be my vote for sure. All right. Well, let's take a quick break here. And when we return, more headlines of the week.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
So this week I'm focusing on everything but the election, because I don't know about you two, but they've been a very hard few days for me to process. And I think living in a blue bubble made the national election results even more surreal and kind of inconceivable. And the way we're going to weather the next 4 years is by focusing on local politics and, what we can control and supporting our communities, even if we do drive each other a little crazy sometimes. And speaking of driving each other crazy, the first story I wanted to share was that the 3 city commissioners who were forcing a break with the Joint Office of Homeless Services abandoned their plans. These were the 3 commissioners that very abruptly announced a couple weeks back they wanted to end the contract with the county for a joint office that, oversees homeless services. In a joint statement this Wednesday, Renee Gonzalez, Dan Ryan, and Mingus Mapp said pulling the plug on their plans will allow space for the new city council, mayor, and county commissioners to renegotiate the Homelessness Response Services Intergovernmental Agreement if they choose, which is so considerate of them. So very nice.
Okay, they rolled it back. This just in, nothing changed. Okay. Hey, we had a bad idea. We made everybody freak out. Everybody was like, let's testify. Let's spend the city attorney's time on it. Just kidding. Most of us lost the election.
Yeah. It was noted as possibly a last Hail Mary for a lot of them, and it did not work. On to better news. Also this Sunday, the Rose City Rollers Wheels of Justice, which is an all-star squad of the best skaters in Portland's longtime Women's Roller Derby League, commemorated our city's Derby League's 20-year existence by not only hosting the Roller Derby Global Championship on their home turf, but by becoming 5-time world champs. And I was actually there to witness the winning match against St. Louis, Missouri's arch rival All-Star. And there were teams there from of course, all over the US, Canada, Europe, Australia. It was so cool to hear so many different languages being spoken and seeing all the fans that showed up all the way from Australia, all the way from France to support their teams. And so if you want to feel embraced in a warm hug of Portland and see a bunch of badass women crash into each other, I implore you, go see a roller derby match. There's still a few games happening through early December at their Oaks Park venue. Have you guys ever been to a match?
I have. I heard about this one. I heard it was 1 point at halftime. Yeah. It was like a super close championship. I have to admit I'm a little more of an Oregon Ducks guy, but hello, we already won a world championship. So whatever, Ducks, who cares about you?
I've never been, but I'm eager to bandwagon.
Do it, Althea.
Let's get in there. Way to go.
Yeah, I would highly suggest you YouTube how roller derby works because it's very hard to watch it if you have no idea what's happening. Anyhow, another awesome community event our city has been supporting for 20 years is the Portland Queer Documentary Film Festival. It's returning for 3 nights at the Hollywood Theater November 15th through 17th, and they're showcasing 13 documentaries. There are 2 I wanted to highlight real quick. The first one, if you at all saw the groundbreaking Paris is Burning documentary that introduced the world to New York City drag ballroom culture, you might remember the heartbreaking character of Venus Extravaganza. So this new documentary is making a West Coast premiere. It's related to Paris is Burning, and it's called I'm Your Venus. And they pick up on Venus Extravaganza's cold case because, sorry guys, spoiler alert, she was murdered during the filmmaking of Paris is Burning. And the film follows both her biological and ballroom families as they unite to seek justice and honor her legacy. So I'm ready to bawl my eyes out because that was like the big twist when you watch Paris is Burning. You're falling in love with Venus Extravaganza, and then she's like murdered for being a trans woman. Anyhow, I'm really excited to see that, see where we're at with that case. And the other one I'm interested in checking out is Outliers and Outlaws. I'll just read part of the description here. The Eugene Lesbian Project shares the town's mid-century history in this documentary's world premiere. Outliers and Outlaw presents tales of lesbian world builders who migrated to the college town in the 1960s and 80s, narrated by Team Dresh's vocalist Jody Bliley, featuring intimate portraits set back then and now. Viewers are treated to candid stories of hope, hard times, humor, and a commitment to social change. I knew Eugene was a big lesbian town, but I didn't know the history of it. So I'm actually really excited to learn this like local history lesson. Did you guys know that? I didn't really. I just thought it was hippies.
¿Por qué no los dos?
What is that? I was like, are you speaking Spanish, hippie?
Not well.
Why not both? Okay. There's also just other amazing documentaries happening those, 3 nights showing marginalized folks fighting oppression by like gathering strength in their communities. And I feel like even if you're not part of the Alphabet family, we can just all use a reminder on how that works. So I think it would be inspiring for people to go check it out if you need a bit of inspiration. Also, just the resident L-Pod orcas return to Penn Cove. Althea, you should know because you grew up in Seattle. If you don't know this, many people did not think that was going to happen. We have our own resident orcas up here in the Northwest. Many of them were going extinct because of SeaWorld and the lack of salmon. And some of these pods are coming back to their old hunting grounds. So that's great. Especially Penn Cove was a pretty heartbreaking situation for them because that's where they were gathered to get thrown into SeaWorld and other places. So they stopped going. And so when they came back, people were cheering. People were so excited. And yeah, the world is healing in certain parts.
Orcas are incredible. I went on a deep dive about how smart they are and how they have culture and language and dialects and they cooperate with humans and they don't. I cried. And that as soon as we stopped killing them and capturing them, things got better. Crazy.
Imagine that.
Did you know we could stop and things would get better? Nature would heal?
How about that?
Wild.
What about you, Jake?
Well, I'm really glad to hear about the film festival. Not to be Captain Come Down, but I think we're entering a period where we're going to try and see an active effort to erase queer identities. And let's not let that happen. Let's celebrate and recognize the diversity and not go back. So I think every little step, whether it's something like that or something political, is going to be important in the future. So let's all step up.
Yeah. Well, with that, you guys, thank you so much. It's my first time hosting 2 outside guests. It's not John or Julia. So this was exciting for me.
You did a great job.
Yeah.
Thank you. Really, you guys.
You deserve a promotion and a raise.
I hope everyone's hearing. That has nothing to do with this. But yeah, thank you guys so much. And thanks for being so thoughtful in your breakdown, in your election analysis. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. It was fun, as always.
You too.
That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thank you for listening. Our executive producer is John Atariani. Our producers this week were Julia Fiaioni and Selena C.A. Reynolds. Our Hey Portland newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan, and our host is me, Claudia Meza. Original music by Jenny Conley and Steven Drizos. Additional music by Epidemic Sound and All the Kimonos. We'll be back Monday morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.